Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Happy Easter, everybody. This is Liz Mattori, your guest host for the Kevin Jackson Show on KJRadio.com. So, just in time for Easter, there was an op-ed article written by Cardinal Dolan of New York, Wall Street Journal last Friday, highlighting the notion that the Democrats abandon Catholics. And as a Catholic, I was raised Catholic. My mom is from the Philippines, as I said before, and so we're all Catholics. Most of us are. We're either Muslim or Catholic from the Philippines, actually. Most of us are Catholics because, don't forget, the Spanish conquistadores got over there and was there for 300 years, but that's a whole nother story. So I was raised Catholic. My dad's Baptist, but I guess my mom won that conversation. But yeah, so, this week is really huge for all of us Christians around the world. Today, currently, is Good Friday. That's when we believe that Jesus died and was crucified to fulfill the scriptures to save us, and was arisen, 3 days later, which is Easter. So I thought this article was really poignant now, because I used to be a Democrat, as I said before, and being a Catholic and being a Democrat was always difficult, especially when it came to abortion and pro-life. And, a lot of the listeners out there, many of you are pro-life, some of you are pro-choice, and that's really been one of the major shifts to even me personally. Even one of my special friends, for example, he used to be a pro-choice Republican. He, it really, when it hits you and you become pro-life, or you rediscover you believe that, life starts at conception, and, you learn about biology, and you have the whole conversation on how, babies develop. It's very difficult for you to be pro-choice as well. And again, I am not trying to be offensive to anyone, particularly the people, like some of my supporters are pro-choice, and they know that I am now very vocal about being pro-life. But when it comes to an entire party that a lot of Americans of Irish descent came over, and just like black people, just like Jewish people, Irish Americans have always been loyal to the Democrat Party. Now all of a sudden, when you have Tom Perez, saying that no exceptions, you have to be pro-choice, you have to be for a woman's right to choose and the privacy of her body. Again, those are the two fundamental differences for pro-choice and pro-life. We believe that life begins at conception, and then they believe that it's a woman's right to choose, and they have dominion over their body. So therefore, and now even, as I said, on another one of these things is, the Democrat Party now has gone to the extreme. They are pushing all the way up until beyond viability, meaning beyond the 20 weeks, beyond the, 35 weeks. A child literally could survive, and they, just because that child is still within the mother's body, they believe that that person gets a right to end the other person's life because it's her choice. And we have to be careful, again, like there's, I'll get back to the article, but, all these words, pro-choice was, I think they paid a marketer like $1 million to create that phrase, pro-choice, because they were looking for an accessible word to get women specifically to literally rally and contribute and donate and support eugenicists like Planned Parenthood and kill their babies. So, when you have the cardinal, and again, some of you guys who are listening aren't Catholic, so, we believe in the Pope, right? There's the Pope, which is the head of the Catholic Church, and then the cardinals are all around the world, and major cities, like there's one in Baltimore, and then there's one in D.C. The cardinals are kind of responsible for the Catholics within their jurisdiction. So they're all kind of like, they're both kind of like the official leaders, the political leaders, and they're also can be picked to be pope. Like that's where the pope comes from and ascends are from the cardinals from around the world. So that's a little sidetrack thing. But, you know, the cardinal was saying, you know, now that they are actively pushing for abortion and making Democrats choose, either you're allowed to be in the party, but if you want to be a Democrat, then you absolutely must be for abortion. That's how bad it is, especially in a place like New York, and it's turning into that, like here in Maryland. And funnily enough, Maryland was the Catholic colony. That's the eerie thing about what's happening in Maryland, where we were formed as a colony by, you know, the Catholics. But anyway, so the other issue that they are losing Catholics on is, you know, tax credits for when your children are going to parochial schools or, you know, Christian schools, Catholic schools, etc. And that's the odd thing too, that public education, I mean, there are people who, you know, are adamant about sending their children to Catholic school, but many times now it's about affordability, where they don't feel like, you know, their children can be, you know, safe in public schools, or they need a better education than what's offered in public schools, but they want to send their child to, you know, a smaller school, so they choose Catholic, but, you know, maybe private schools are too expensive. So you're literally having the government say, well, you don't get a choice. Talk about choice. A woman's right to choose where she is allowed to send her children. And we're going to talk about a lot of this stuff, but we have to be mindful of what is going on. Stuff is so extreme. And the funny thing about all of this is that we have all been told that it's the Republican Party that we have to be afraid of. You know, just like Black people, Irish American people were told for years and years and years and years and generations that the Republican Party was the bad party. I know for a fact that that was the big lie. Now, don't get me wrong, we're not saints, but the Democrat Party has gotten so extreme and we have to be careful.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Do you owe back taxes to the IRS or state? The secret to avoiding the IRS nightmare is to seek professional representation. My friends at Security Tax Associates provide the most cost-effective and ethical representation in the industry while helping to avoid seizures, levies, and wage garnishments. Security Tax Associates is here to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken to permanently eliminate any possibility of future tax burdens once and for all. For a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Security Tax Associates, 844-779-4177. That's 844-779-4177. 844-779-4177. Or visit them at securitytaxassociates.com.
Beth Cook Moranville, author of Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope.
Hope, that wonderful, wonderful 4-letter word that you may feel completely out of. I wrote this book to give you great hope. It's not too late. If fetal position is an all too familiar place for you, I understand. If the next 60 seconds are too long, this book is for you. Wherever you are right now, whether you're dealing with divorce or death or sickness, take hope. You are going to make it through this pain. Don't roll your eyes. I've walked this road and I know it. The best is yet to come.
Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope from author and speaker Beth Cook Moranville, can be found on Amazon.com or Kindle.com. For more information, visit closerthanyourBreath.com or on Facebook at Closer Than Your Breath.
Jackson Radio Show.
Hey, welcome back. My name is Liz Mattori. I'm filling in for Kevin Jackson on his show on KJRadio.com. So, yeah, I'm just gonna talk about it again because it's, I really don't feel like talking about Stormy Daniels, so we'll talk about the children who, and I said children who, had a protest, if you will, march last weekend. I know a lot of people have talked about it. I'm not trying to, just talk about it ad nauseum, but I really wonder, and maybe you thought about it too, like teenage angst. Like, I had angst when I was a teenager. I'm sure you had angst when you were a teenager. Is this different? Is it just that they can, have different avenues to express themselves? Or is there full-on manipulation? Again, like I know I've been yelled at before about not giving these children credit. And again, I will say over and over again, they are children. It's not that I'm trying to take away from anything that these children are doing, but I had an opportunity to connect with a young woman, older girl, adolescent girl, over the weekend, and she was really upset that she wasn't participating in the march. We were doing other political activities up in Baltimore, and, she had said that her mom hadn't given her permission to go protest, and I actually know her mother, and her mother was like, I would have allowed her to go if she had a reason, but she didn't give me a reason, so why go? And again, it goes back to this concept of fitting in and how it was in high school and to an extent middle school, where if all the kids are doing it, I have to do it too. Again, shootings, school shootings, have occurred. I'm not taking away from that. But it really got me to think, like, is it different than how when we were teenagers? So I was born in 1980, and I was a teenager, if you will, in the 90s. So I took a moment to kind of think about what was going on in the news, if you will, that could have triggered us to take up arms, or not arms, metaphorical arms, not real arms. So I looked into it, and one of the first things that came up was the Branch Davidian cult, Waco, Janet Reno, and that standoff. Remember, it was like weeks and weeks. Janet Reno, our Attorney General, they decided to shoot out and kill this entire cult. And so that was a big fleck point. Then, of course, in 1994, Kurt Cobain shot himself. I mean, he literally took a shotgun and I guess was able to shoot himself, or jerry-rigged it to a point where he could shoot himself, and that was huge. I mean, I was just, a freshman, and, Nirvana was huge. It was Nirvana, it was Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots. I mean, man, just take a moment and think about the amazing music that was made in the 90s. I think the 90s probably was like the last decade of great music, and I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback for that, but, Kurt Cobain's suicide was huge. That was the first time in my, personal history that I learned about, depression and, people killing themselves. I guess I had lived a life to whereas I never knew anyone personally, thank God, but Kurt Cobain was huge. We didn't take up arms and, not target, I keep on saying take up arms. We didn't go and protest because this man, shot himself with, a firearm. And then what else happened? Yeah, by 1999 was Columbine. So yes, I was a freshman that year, in college already. But that was a huge, 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 huge moment in our American history. And it was a very jarring experience. But people, high schoolers, did not protest then. So what is it about now that you get hundreds and thousands of children to walk out of their schools during the week and then all of a sudden this weekend ascend onto the nation's capital and other major cities? And I would argue they're not only, don't forget, let's be honest, these shootings are also done by fellow teenagers who have an extreme form of this teenage angst that I was talking about. But after that, you're like, what is it about these kids? Or maybe it is several someones out there that are taking advantage of this moment in these children's lives, where they feel so out of sorts and so out of place to begin with. It's almost as if they're lighting a fuse on Kindle. And if you look up the word angst, which I had to look up for just by virtue of looking it up, angst means a feeling of deep anxiety or dread, typically about a human condition or the state of the world. Yeah, we're all in angst. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's, mainstream media and, the technology that we have in social media that has amplified all of our angst to a point where people have now been galvanized and activated to protest. And, I don't trust communism, and nor should anyone, but that is their MO, people. They have been looking for that generation, and you go to the Naked Communists, and you go to all these books that are written, and we have to learn about the enemy. I kid you not, folks. We need to learn about what communism is, because this is what's happening. They were fiending for an American generation that they can totally manipulate. And you are seeing it firsthand, folks. And who are these kids, guys? Who are these children? And I had to do the math. So if you're 14 to 18 or even younger, you were born between the years of 2000 and 2004. These people are not millennials. They are the ones that were born into a world of 9/11. And we all have to be mindful of the fact that their entire lives, they have been underneath a world of hurt. And yes, there are people, and maybe it was by design, but this generation is totally being taken advantage of.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Hey, you're listening to The Kevin Jackson Show on KJRadio.com. My name is Liz Mattori. I'm your guest host right now. You can check me out on Twitter and Facebook at Liz Mattori, which is LizMatory. I was dropping my mom off today at the hospital. She always goes to Howard University Hospital, where she and my father worked for a long, long time. And it was good to, see everybody who used to work with her, and super cute people. But, I was driving back up Georgia Avenue in D.C., and, those electrical sort of utility boxes that are on the corner of the street, and people put, signs up and placards advertising, the next... Well, back in the day, it used to be the next go-go or parade or the next, event. And I looked over and I was like, oh, it's one of those flyers. I haven't seen one of those in a while because I don't do that where I'm living now in Montgomery County, of course, because that would be preposterous, to put some, non-regulated flyer on a side of one of our municipal establishment frameworks, but I digress. So on the corner of Georgia, I was at a stoplight and I was waiting to turn right, and I was looking over. I saw this statement that said, "Activist jobs to protect your civil rights," and I almost lost it. Activist jobs? Are you kidding me? Activist jobs? They're flyering for activist jobs? Last time I checked, being an activist is not a job. And you don't apply for it. You are an activist or you are not an activist. You are moved and motivated to take up a cause, and many times you don't get paid for it. And once again, I've talked about this multiple times, where I'm telling you right here and right now, this social justice warrior stuff is fake as I don't know what. And the fact that this is happening literally on the campus of Howard University, the bedrock for the literal civil rights movement, for generations now, for 2 or 3 generations, we Howardites, that's what we call people who graduated from Howard University, have lived, breathed, fought for civil rights and literal, actual social justice for generations. And fast forward to 2018, they are advertising for activist jobs? Oh my word. I don't even know what to do, folks. Can you believe that? It reminds me of how now all of a sudden, I don't know if you know this, but the people who picket, the unions that picket, they actually hire people minimum wage to picket for unions. Because either they don't have enough members in the unions anymore, or the union members don't have the time or don't want to picket. So I remember, about 4 or 5 years ago, I noticed that phenomenon where there are people who they're picketing. I don't even know what they were picketing for. But you look at them and you're like, you know what? I have a feeling that these folks are not union members. And somebody had to tell me once, they were like, yeah, they're being paid to picket. And I'm like, well, doesn't that defeat the purpose? The whole point of, protest, and the whole point of creating a big moment to rally the troops and cry out and, again, galvanize support for fill-in-the-blank cause. When did it turn into a job? And y'all, sorry. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, scream, or whatever when I saw that flyer on the side of a utility box saying, "Activist jobs to protect your civil rights." What are you supposed to do with that, folks? For a fact that right there is bogus. The people who have been activists, like myself, and I wasn't even one of the big ones, but all the people before us, are they rolling in their graves right now because they're seeing what has happened to the civil rights movement? The civil rights movement literally has been bastardized by these people. Is it because they don't know their history? Is it because young people are wanting to be in and doing the cool stuff or whatever? I know that they need to get paid, but my whole point is, when you are getting paid to do something and you have to answer to a flyer and you're not moved for said cause, but you're being paid to be there, you're being paid to make the case, that's not your case anymore. You literally are being controlled. They're people who are paying you to say whatever they want you to say. And you have to show up, show out, and literally act the part. Literally, that was a flyer for an acting gig. That is what that flyer signifies. And not to take away from people who have been a part of the cause and who are moved to become active. But the moment that you are flyering, it's like when they had in the DNC, don't forget, this all goes back to that darn election in 2016, where you had the DNC and all the people who were Bernie supporters, they left the arena in Philadelphia. They were so angry, they went and protested. Like old school, little P, galvanized support, walk down the streets, protest. And you know for a fact that the DNC put ads for seat fillers specifically because they knew that the optics would be bad. If they panned out, if CNN and MSNBC panned out to the crowd at the DNC, they would see that they weren't being supported by the people, so therefore they had to place an ad in the frickin', I think it was Craigslist, that they were placing ads for seat fillers because they knew that they would be losing hundreds and thousands of people because of the whole Dem exit. This, we're witnessing right here with activist jobs flyers. We have to call out them on their BS. We know that, unfortunately, and then that's the thing too, it's unfortunate that it has gotten so bad. I mean, really, folks, what's left? I'm all about, that's the thing, coming from my own personal history, I have always, rallied for the underdog. I've always appreciated the fact that, yes, people, particularly here in this country, have an ability and should fight for their equal rights. That's me to my core. But when you start leafleting and hiring people to do that, you literally are erasing the legitimacy of said cause. And so, again, turn it on the person who applies, okay, so I'm going to apply. I see a flyer on my college campus, and here at Howard, we pride ourselves in, activism. It's our, legacy. Literally, the school was founded to educate freed Black people. Yeah, it was also founded by Republicans, but everybody chooses to forget that moment. General Howard, the person who the school is named after, was a raging Republican. But of course, that piece, that huge nugget of information, is always what's missing in any of these arguments. The fundamental issue, and we'll talk about it in other parts, but it is that economic equality and the ability to, again, tap into your God-given potential and thrive and be able to compete against whoever you need to compete for in order to make that difference. Going beyond race, going beyond religion, going beyond your gender. That is how you make a difference. It's not getting hired to be an activist, folks. That's not it, dude. So, more in a moment.
Kevin Jackson on the Black Sphere Radio Network.
Do you owe back taxes to the IRS or state? The secret to avoiding the IRS nightmare is to seek professional representation. My friends at Security Tax Associates provide the most cost-effective and ethical representation in the industry while helping to avoid seizures, levies, and wage garnishments. Security Tax Associates is here to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken to permanently eliminate any possibility of future tax burdens once and for all. For a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Security Tax Associates, 844-779-4177. That's 844-779-4177. 844-779-4177. Or visit them at securitytaxassociates.com.
Putting an end to identity politics. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Hey, so you're listening to the Kevin Jackson Show on KJRadio.com. My name is Liz Mattori. I'm your guest host. So this week we found out that Prince overdosed. We already knew that he overdosed, but it was confirmed that it was a high amount of fentanyl in his system. You know, April 2016 was when he passed away, but fast forward to 2018, the word fentanyl or the drug fentanyl has become a commonly known word these days. As you know, we are in the middle of an opioid epidemic. They say that the death toll now has reached the heights of what was the AIDS epidemic in 1995, the height of the AIDS epidemic in 1995. The overdose deaths have gotten to that stark rate. And, I think, again, we all have to be mindful of what's going on. We've talked about it, for the past several Fridays already with you. As you know, unfortunately, I had a friend who overdosed in the summer of 2016. His particular drugs of choice were synthetic marijuana, and he used to take PCP like periodically. I don't know if you can be a periodic PCP user, but it is what it is. But unfortunately, when you are friends with people who, abuse drugs, you sort of have an interesting understanding that most times there's a root. So some of you might have some friends who are older, for example, that have just had a hip replacement surgery or a knee replacement surgery, and they have been, prescribed, opioids for their pain management. Some people do get hooked on them, and the medication gets too expensive, and then they go to street drugs, which is, of course, heroin, and there, goes that cycle. But for the most part, it always goes back to pain management, not only physical pain, but psychological and mental pain. Another highlight of how our country has, developed, if you will, is that we have the highest amount of stress-related illnesses in the world. And of course, we can evaluate why and how that occurred over the course of a decade or 2 decades or what have you. I know a lot of you God-fearing people out there would believe that our going away from the word and the message and getting away from our church foundation has definitely exacerbated, if not made, the issues exponentially worse for the individual coping and dealing with the stresses and anxiety and depression of their day-to-day. And, Christopher, of course, was the son of Marion Barry, so he unfortunately grew up in the limelight, and he never really liked it. And I mention that to say that a lot of people who have these drug-related issues and also simultaneously who are entertainers like singers or musicians, they tend to have anxiety and it's beyond stage fright. Like, they're actually super duper shy people. And it's weird, because you think, oh, they're in the spotlight and they're stars. And, I'm not saying that this is the situation with Prince, but it definitely, then the news this week definitely kind of triggered this thought process for me. What exactly is fentanyl? So it's a synthetic opioid that is 100 times stronger than morphine and 30 to 50 times stronger than heroin itself. And I know for a fact, I actually just went to an event up in Harford County here in Maryland, where the sheriff was talking. And unfortunately, a place like Harford, if you've ever driven from, DC, Baltimore, New York, the 95 corridor, you'll drive through Harford before you get to Maryland House. And, that county, as you will know, is a very rural sort of suburban community. Very beautiful, simple living. A lot of people commute to the different cities in the area to work, but then they, settle in their home life. But now, as of this last week, the sheriff had said that we have gotten to a record 100 overdoses in the last 3 months. So for the first 3 months of 2018, Harford County, a very relatively rural county in the state of Maryland, has surpassed their overdoses in the first 3, months of 2018. It's weird because it's like it's a Schedule II drug. There are other drugs that are highly regulated now that we could talk about in another session, but, fentanyl had been approved by the FDA. And so why are we seeing deaths, caused by opioids and things that are allegedly supposed to be used to, again, manage pain, but they're so potent that, they can kill. And the types that are out there now are so strong that police officers actually have to, when they go to a place where someone has overdosed and they might be exposed to the drugs, they have to cover their bodies from head to toe because it's so potent that one spore of it can infiltrate your own body. We just have to really be mindful of what's going on. We have all these people who are passing away so quickly. I don't know if you remember Stone Temple Pilots. I told you I was an 80s, 90s baby, so that's why I refer back to one of the greatest decades of American music. Scott Weiland passed away in December 2015, and we don't know why, but he passed away in his sleep, and he had a small trace of cocaine in his system. He suffered anxiety, and he probably was self-medicating. Dolores O'Riordan, who was the head singer for the Cranberries, which is another fantastic Irish, of course, band of the 90s, she passed away just in January, and she also had a bipolar disorder issue, and of course many people, again, self-medicate. One of the most, poignant self-medicated people was Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston actually passed away on my birthday in 2012, February 11th, 2012. She overdosed. I think her system, she drowned, had a heart attack. She had Xanax, cocaine, Flexeril, and even Benadryl in her system. And I know there's a lot of conspiracy around her passing, but a lot of these situations, I'm assuming, how does this? Of course, and I wanted to mention Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson actually used propofol, which is a sedation drug that is used to put people to sleep before they have an intense surgery. And so remember that doctor, his, house call doctor would literally, I guess Michael Jackson couldn't sleep, whether it was because of the pain that he had from, the amazing amount of, physical labor that he had to go through with his performance and practice. He apparently, whenever he practices for his concerts, he was just so intense with his, he didn't just practice, he would perform each time. So at the end of the night, every night, apparently, his doctor would drug him to sleep. We would never know, unfortunately, whether it was because of the pain, whether it was physical or mental or both. all this being said, we have to be more mindful of each other and also mindful of ourselves. We also need to admit when we are under stress. We need to evaluate what's going on. Like, what can I control? I know my mom would always say, she'd say, you can only control what you can control. You don't allow people to have free rent in your brain. She's really big on meditation. She's like, I'll have one of my moments and she's like, are you praying? Are you meditating? Are you just, I've given you that book about meditation. And I'm like, yeah, Mom, I'm seeing it. And so, of course, she's just so loving and she'll like give me so much information. It's kind of overwhelming, but I do recommend, there's so many things online. I don't want to do an advertisement for YouTube, but what I've done in the last year after, dealing with Christopher's death, I thought about visiting, a psychologist, but the first thing the psychologist said, she wanted to give me drugs. And I was like, I don't want to have to drug myself in order to heal, and she would say, just to take the edge off, And I was like, no, practice of psychology and psychiatry, has pushed drugs as the first resort. And we as human beings and, patients, if you will, have to really push back and be our own advocates. There's so many holistic solutions. Again, there's meditation, there's faith, there's peace, there's prayer, there's yoga, so many different options. And it doesn't necessarily have to be through drugs.
He won't stop until he's the top-rated radio talk show host in America.
What kind of weird competitive freak are you?
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
I tell you what. Is Facebook trying to stay in the news, or is it just me? I'm Liz Mattori. I'm your guest host for the Kevin Jackson Show on KJRadio.com. So yeah, once again, Facebook. Did you know that 73% of the adult population in the United States is on Facebook? So let's start off there. Any sort of thing, issue, or what have you that Facebook is doing, saying, or not doing or saying is affecting 73% of the adult population in the United States. And of course, that's not including the rest of the world. So when you see an issue about your privacy that has now been flared by, Cambridge Analytica, it's some, research firm that sells the data from Facebook to candidates, campaigns specifically. This one was to Donald Trump. And again, as a political person and a former candidate and a former campaign manager and field organizer, that in itself is not random. How else do you think people market to you? And I got mad at one of my college friends, and actually she doesn't talk to me anymore. She actually defriended me. It was one of my first major defriends. This is before I even became a Republican. But I told her that, as we know, Facebook is it's a social network, but the social network, ultimately speaking, only makes a profit because it sells data for marketing purposes. And so I told her once, I was like, hey, I didn't even tell her. I was, I actually do love this lady to death. She was one of my roommates in college, and as I said, she's a year ahead of me, and she has a daughter. She might even have more children than one now. I don't even know because I'm not on Facebook with her anymore. Go figure. But she posted a picture of her daughter potty training, and I posted on Facebook, I draw the line at potty training, because I'm very, I'm more politically active and out there now because of my, activism. But, years ago when we were just friends, sharing information with friends and other friends or what have you, people would post all these pictures, especially of their children. And you're like, yo, Do you realize that anybody can download that picture and use your child's picture for nefarious reasons? And so everyone out there with your children, your grandchildren, or whatever, please watch what you post on your social media apparatus. I'm just saying. So you talk about, privacy. So apparently I heard this on, there's a radio station in my area called WTOP. It's like our news radio show. It's like 24 hours, news, weather, traffic, information. And they said that the issue with this particular data collection that Facebook does is that, when you have to opt into certain applications. So like, for example, like there are some applications that want to integrate from, for you using this, and they can log in through your Facebook. Please, if you don't learn anything from me, learn this. Never, ever, ever, unless you need it for like work purposes or something that's super duper neat necessary, do not sync applications. Like when you have a new thing, whether it's on your phone or what have you, and they say, okay, you can log in with your Facebook because they think, and they're making you assume that it's easier for you to do that. No. The only reason why they're doing that is to, again, what I say before, access your data. So that's lesson rule number 1000% most important rule when you're interacting with social media. It's a marketing tool, and do not link your accounts. So if you say no and you don't give that app or Facebook a certain amount of data, whether it's your email, your phone number, what have you, those are very important. As you know, we communicate through phone and specifically email. So that's really the data, yeah? Beyond your buying history and what you talk about and what political aspirations or leanings you have, that's a whole nother aspect. But even just your email and your phone number are like huge data points for marketers like myself, actually. But anyway, so if you say no, but your friend says yes, that company, that data mining apparatus has access to your data now, just because your friend said yes. And that, I think, is like mind-blowing. Because here we're thinking that we have some sort of control over what information is out there. And, you're like, okay, well, that's the reason why I don't have an Android phone, actually. I don't know if that's a bad thing to say, but because it has Google as its base and it uses a Gmail account. Again, talking about that integration piece, now your phone is highly integrated into every single thing that you talk about, every single text. I mean, and we could talk about the NSA some other time, but we have to be careful. Anyway, they're having an issue in the EU and the UK because, oddly enough, they have stronger privacy protections over there in Europe than they do here. So we have to watch this case go through, and we'll see how this all plays out. I mean, be careful, as I said, when you're on social media. It's great to interact with people. Definitely, this is where people interact because that's how we are living our lives. But please, please, please read what you click. If you have this agreement, if you agree with it or you don't agree with it, you have to still know what you're up against. Be careful of what you share, what pictures you share. Definitely when it comes to minors, know that Facebook actually owns all the stuff that you write and you post and even pictures. So, I mean, you have possession, but they can also use it for whatever purposes they want. And again, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, all of these things only really exist to get your information so that companies can promote to you better and sell to you better. And so now that you have that information, how are you going to interact with these social media platforms? Of course, we're going to still use Facebook. I don't know if you've been blocked from it. I personally, knock on wood, have not been blocked from it. But I know that a lot of my conservative friends are being blocked. Would you drop it? Are you willing to stop using Facebook?
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Do you owe back taxes to the IRS or state? The secret to avoiding the IRS nightmare is to seek professional representation. My friends at Security Tax Associates provide the most cost-effective and ethical representation in the industry while helping to avoid seizures, levies, and wage garnishments. Security Tax Associates is here to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken to permanently eliminate any possibility of future tax burdens once and for all. For a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Security Tax Associates, 844-779-4177. That's 844-779-4177. 844-779-4177. Or visit them at securitytaxassociates.com.
Beth Cook Moranville, author of Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope.
Hope, that wonderful, wonderful 4-letter word that you may feel completely out of. I wrote this book to give you great hope. It's not too late. If fetal position is an all too familiar place for you, I understand. If the next 60 seconds are too long, this book is for you. Wherever you are right now, whether you're dealing with divorce or death or sickness, take hope. You are going to make it through this pain. Don't roll your eyes. I've walked this road and I know it. The best is yet to come.
Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope from author and speaker Beth Cook Moranville, can be found on Amazon.com or Kindle.com. For more information, visit closerthanyourBreath.com or on Facebook at Closer Than Your Breath.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
So this next topic, I actually asked my Facebook friends what they wanted me to cover this week. I'm Liz Mattori. I'm filling in for Kevin Jackson on the Kevin Jackson Show on KJ Radio. You can follow me and connect with me and ask me what you want me to cover next Friday, for example, just by going to Twitter, which is at Liz Mattori, which is LIZMATORY, and also on Facebook, LIZMATORY. There are a couple of pages that are in reference to my name, but the one that just has Liz Mattori on it, I interact with the most. So I asked my Facebook friends / followers, what issues they wanted me to cover. And some of the things I had already, decided on talking about, like a lot of people want me to talk more about Second Amendment issues, and we can have a whole 3-hour discussion on that. But one that I thought was really fascinating, a mother had asked me about talking about Fukushima. That was, if you all remember, the result of the largest earthquake in Japanese history, caused a tsunami, and then the tsunami hit the nuclear plant in Fukushima, Japan. It triggered about 10 different reactors, or half the reactors, and the nuclear waste basically not only spilled throughout Fukushima, but it spilled into the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. Lo and behold, what's on the other side of the Pacific Ocean is basically California, right? So, and of course, all of the wonderful islands in between. My mom's actually from the Philippines, so shout out to the Philippines. But you heard about it, you knew that it happened. And the last time we really talked about nuclear disaster was Chernobyl, right? And so in Ukraine. And so you knew that was a huge, huge, crazy disaster. And you knew that Fukushima, when it happened in 2011, in March 2011, it was just devastating. But then you didn't hear about it at all. And I would argue you still don't hear about it. And even when I was trying to prepare for this segment, I looked online and I tried to see what I could find, looking in like Fukushima, like how is it now? There are a lot of YouTube videos, and those are always useful, especially to get, dig in deep and see the different sides of things. But there's also an issue about how just 100 miles off the coast of California, the only term I can think of is like plume, but the plume would be in the water. So like the nastiness of the nuclear waste is now like floating toward California. And you know what's in water, but obviously fish, wildlife, sea life, things that we actually eat and consume. Salmon, of course, every other tuna, just think, sushi, Japanese sushi. Floating. Before it was cut up, it used to be a fish, right? So you're basically eating it. Should we be worried about our seafood and other things? I mean, I think her son is in the Navy, and when they went to Japan, they basically had to be like decontaminated. All of their belongings and themselves, their person had to be decontaminated because of what they were exposed to in that region of the world. Again, we're a closed ecosystem. So whether it's butterfly effect, whether it's literal physics, everything that happens over there eventually will get over here. How will we ever find out what to do about it? And again, like we're talking about the importance of media, and it's also not only what they cover, but what they don't cover. And I literally tried to look and research, more information about Fukushima now, and there is not that much information out there. But a lady who is Facebook friends with me asked me specifically this week about it. Guys, what are we gonna do? What do we do when we learn more and more and more every day, all day, that there's so much information that we aren't privy to? Just because you don't know it doesn't mean that it didn't occur. But as I said, our good old media and our journalists out there, when are they going to do their jobs? And then they got people like me who, I'm not, professionally trained to do this, but do I think that it's important to get information out there and connect to, the citizenry and let them, again, we're all thinking for ourselves on the conservative side, but, we have to push and prod and figure out and find out the truth, because lo and behold, you're talking about, 7 years ago? I mean, toxic waste or nuclear waste doesn't just evaporate. It's still in there. It's still seeping through our oceans. And I know that, we on the conservative side, we tend to not be environmentalists, but be careful. We're also conservationists. And the word conserve and conservative are from the same root. We believe in conserving or the conservation of nature, because what do we live? We live in nature. So maybe this is an area that we conservatives can pick up and, do the dirty work and try to figure out what's the truth about what's going on in Fukushima and the remnants of it all, especially when our military and our Navy, and sailors are being exposed to it. Yeah, and we also don't know if we're eating the stuff. I actually work with a naturopath, and he's really big on eating spirina, which is that green powdery substance. You can get it at nature food stores, super easy. And he literally puts spirina in everything. He puts it in milk, he puts it in water, he puts it, makes cakes out of it, to try to counterbalance the radiation and the nastiness, I guess, of the nuclear waste that he believes, and I believe him as well. I don't eat spirulina all the time, but that's basically it's grounded up seaweed, and so that whatever you consume, you are, you are what you eat, literally. What are the ramifications of being exposed to nuclear waste? Obviously cancer, apparently like you lose your faculties, your all your tissue, all your soft tissue like deteriorates. If we're consuming this without our knowledge, for example, because we live all the way across the other side of the globe, do we have any tools to combat that? And I would argue the first tool that we need as people, as citizens, as learned people, aware people, number one is the information. So let's figure out what's going on in Fukushima and try to help this this mother out, because I couldn't really find very much information.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
All right, so we're coming up to another census, folks. It's 2018. The next one's going to be 2020, right? This was in the news this week as well. I'm Liz Mattori. I am filling in for Kevin Jackson on The Kevin Jackson Show, kjradio.com. You can follow me on Facebook at Liz Mattori, which is LIZMATORY, and of course on Facebook. So, right, they want to rechange and recreate whatever they want on our census. I don't know about you, but I've always had issue with how they ask about what you are. And of course, this time around, they want to include a question whether you're a citizen or you're not. And you know who can't stand that is your folks over there in California, your cousins. Your cousins over there in California, they're really upset, and they're actually suing because they believe that, it's a violation of whatever. To ask somebody if they're a citizenship or not. Okay, this is the U.S. Census, okay? The United States Census. I mean, we've got a lot of issues all around whether you should ask about people's race, and we'll talk about in a moment, but guess what? Y'all are the people who made it an issue for even us to actually ask that question by 2020. You know and I know that if they didn't allow all these illegal aliens to come up through and all the way up and all around and from here to Tarnation, we wouldn't have to ask that question. Because we already have an immigration program. We know where people are coming. People are vetted. That's the other thing. Y'all don't understand how difficult it is to even come to this country legally. I had mentioned this before. It takes 24 years. 24 years now to come from the Philippines to here. People have to take tests, like blood tests. In some cases, you gotta report how much money you have, and if you have when you're only here for work visas, you have to say you're gonna return back to your country. Green cards, all of these different parts of our immigration system are placed there for a reason. And so this time around, because there's so many people who are here that don't have permission to be here, our government's maybe during the census we can figure this part out. Because don't forget, the people who usually, study immigration patterns and all of that jazz, most of them are hyper-leftist liberal organizations, and of course they don't want the number. They don't want us to really know the number of illegals because they don't want us to be right. So anyway, I'm going to talk about that, a whole nother story. But so another thing they want to do is break up the word, black, and to make the person like myself write down what type of black person you are. And we all know that this is happening not only for black people, but also for Asian people. That both black people and Asian people are going to be broken down into even more compartments. So even if you were born here, you have to figure out, okay, so what sort of black person are you? Or what certain Asian person are you? And then, of course, you can't just say that you're an American citizen, because I think, for me, that should just be how many American citizens live here, how many American citizens live there. Some of the reasons why they break down your race and ethnicity is because they want to know like health trends or what have you. I don't know enough about census taking, but I guess it's a part of it. But a major one is how, of course, money is being spent and allocated. Another reason why people, the numbers matter is how much representation you get in Congress. You know, do you add a certain person or do you lose a representative because the population has shifted so much? But particularly when it comes to that, like, you know, breaking down people even farther, I know the Asian Americans in my community don't want that to happen, because if they say, oh, you know, your grandparent is from Korea, or your mother is from Japan, or like me, my mother's from the Philippines, I literally would have to like fill out whatever bubble they expect me to fill out. And the funny thing is, I had said this on another program. For me, you know, if I were to, you know, answer the race ethnicity question, I don't know, question number 3 or something on the thing, on 2 censuses, whatever you want to call it, I've actually answered that differently twice. First on the 2000 when I was in college, and then again in 2010. In 2000, I wrote down that I was either other or 2 races, because I'm also black and, you know, Asian, if you will, though I'm American. And then by 2010, I was like, all right, well, you know, let's just, you know, give like the black column more credit. So I just checked off black. But I'm the same person. So the funny thing that we need to watch on this whole like census thing is, you know, what is the purpose? And are we at a point now where dividing ourselves even more, even further, might be actually worse? Well, it depends upon who you're asking. You know, the people who want to control us and divide and conquer, they love the whole division. They love to see, okay, these data points are this and this data point is that. They don't really think of us as individual human beings anyway. They just think of us as like numbers on a like a statistic, if you will. But for the rest of us who actually care about our, you know, ourselves and our lives and our principles and our values in our country, what do we need to do this for anymore? The other thing I thought was interesting about the census is that, have you ever seen the words non-Hispanic white? Non-Hispanic white. I would say most of the listeners on this program are considered non-Hispanic white. That's just like regular white people, like native-born white folks. And if you know anything about language, and I remember seeing it for the first time, that means that by default, Hispanic is the default. Because when you throw up non, that means that the non-Hispanic is the other. So they're already othering you in your own darn census. So why is Hispanic, why is even Latino such a big deal these days? You know, I'm gonna get a lot of pushback because I always like ask these questions, you know, especially because I grew up in a very like hyper partisan and you know, racially mindful way. Now that I like start thinking about it, you know, there are like dozens of countries that make up Latin America. And I technically could be considered Latino because my mom is from the Philippines and, you know, she spoke Spanish as well because the Spanish conquistadores got over there and were there for 375 years. So aren't Filipinos Latino too? But we don't get to be counted as Latino. And for a while now, you know, the Latino community benefits greatly by one reason. They have a common language. We as black folks here, our language is English. We also are native born. And so, of course there are Latinos who are native born too, and they're legal immigrants, and some of them are illegals, but because of, and again, I had talked to one of my friends about this, about doing this part, and he was really kind of concerned that I was just going to go too edgy, but if you think about it, it's like cool to be Latino. Like, people would rather be Latino than, nobody really likes to be black. I love to be black, but there's always this like, stigma attached to being a black person anywhere you go, sadly. But to be Latino. It's like super cool these days, right? Nowadays, you get to keep the language as Spanish. You don't really need to learn English. You literally have whole communities. You have the means to create an income, unlike a lot of our native-born people. And you literally are creating your own separate society and culture within our culture. And oh, by the way, and this is the part that my friend didn't want me to talk about, is that I know, and I've witnessed firsthand, the Democrat Party wanting to pander to Latinos because they don't want to deal with the real issues that Black people face. Because over the 50 years of failed Democrat parties, the Black community has gotten way worse, and we have been stuck in that party for oh so long, and no amount of solutions that they offer have actually fixed our issues, quote unquote. Because, oh, by the way, the issues that we have can absolutely positively be fixed, quote unquote, through conservatism. The original way that we used to live our lives before we got messed up by the Democrat Party. But because the Democrat Party doesn't have anything to offer Black people, they get to play the race card and the people of color card and brown people. You remember, how to do the whole brown-black thing? They're able to do that through Latinos. So they get to save themselves from the history, their own party's history of enslaving my ancestors and the issues that have come from that. And they were like, oh, well, just kidding, huh? Well, we're just talking about Black and brown people, but mostly we're really focusing on brown people. And I know that most conservatives and most Republicans don't see race or don't consider race or, all of that. If you kind of take a step back and see, again, how the Democrat Party plays this and how the establishment plays color and race and ethnicity on each other, there's something there.
Kevin Jackson on the Black Sphere Radio Network.
Do you owe back taxes to the IRS or state? The secret to avoiding the IRS nightmare is to seek professional representation. My friends at Security Tax Associates provide the most cost-effective and ethical representation in the industry while helping to avoid seizures, levies, and wage garnishments. Security Tax Associates is here to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken to permanently eliminate any possibility of future tax burdens once and for all. For a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Security Tax Associates, 844-779-4177. That's 844-779-4177. 844-779-4177. Or visit them at securitytaxassociates.com.
Putting an end to identity politics. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
I am going to get into so much trouble for this segment, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm Liz Mattori. I'm sitting in for Kevin Jackson. This is the Kevin Jackson Show on KJRadio.com. You can follow me at Liz Mattori, which is LizMatory on Twitter and Facebook. So, have you ever heard, and I'm sure some of you out there have heard about this whole borderless phenomenon? There are a bunch of people out there, and the numbers are growing, that are encouraging, pushing, wanting for our country to be a borderless society. My first interaction, I had spoken about this a couple weeks ago, was when I participated in a discussion on NPR. It was the first time that I was there to speak on behalf of conservatives and Republicans, and people who are all about America not supporting illegal aliens. And of course, I got a lot of flack. I talked about it before. They were like, oh, that's a racist, bigoted statement. I was like, look, we are the United States of America. We are a sovereign country. We are citizens. We have an immigration system. An immigrant is a legal term. An illegal alien is a different term. So don't get me started with the whole situation. I'll talk about it in another segment. But this interaction was the first time I heard someone stand up in the audience and proclaim that what is wrong with a borderless society. A borderless country does not exist as a country anymore. And so preparing for this segment, I was like, okay, when did this whole borderless phenomenon start? And we never know when anything started, but when our sort of leaders, if you will, championed it was around 2005, 2004. And unfortunately, the president at that time who spoke specifically about that was George W. Bush, Republican. That was prior to the time I was a Republican, so I can't really claim all that. But he used language like New America and North American Community. And you're like, what is that? You know, like I remember even when I was growing up, I'd be like, oh, I'm an American. And they're like, you know, Mexicans and Canadians are Americans too. I was like, y'all know what I'm talking about. There's only one United States of America, and nobody runs around saying that they're Americans except for us. So we are the Americans. Oh my goodness, don't get me started on that. But I started researching, and you know your buddies over there at the Council on Foreign Relations. Sidebar on that, I have a friend who actually was a member or is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. It's kind of weird, freaky, weird thing, because when she told me about it was like a long time ago, and I was like, oh, that's cool, whatever. And now that I know more about what and who they are, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I super duper know people who are in the establishment. It's kind of freaky. Anyway, in 2005, they had this task force that wrote up this, it's online, I mean, for now, I mean, until they're taking it down, but you can find it online. It's a task force on, you know, developing this whole notion of this North American community. And basically, for all intents and purposes, it wants to create Canada, the United States, and Mexico basically as this one huge blob. Not 3 different countries, but like a blob. I looked through it. It's about 30 pages. I think it's also in Spanish and in French, of course. Don't forget, there are 3 different languages that are utilized in the Americas, if you will. There's also Portuguese, but Brazil wasn't a part of this. It was just those 3 states. And the task force comprised, of course, of policy people and scholars and business owners. None of them are like your average citizens people. So these people get to go in their little think tanks and think away, you know, tinker at our society. And, you know, the very top-down approach to living. And so anyway, so you look into it and it says, what happens to these 3 countries? Quote, do they continue on the path of cooperation in promoting a more secure and prosperous North American societies? Or do they pursue divergent and ultimately less secure and less prosperous courses? That would be a tragic mistake. You know, so language is key. That whole thing is a false paradigm. Do you want to cooperate because NAFTA's cooperation and these are 3 awesome societies? Or do you want to just die? Like, these people basically are like, if we stay as sovereign nations, if we stay as countries, then we run the risk of destruction. So instead of destruction, they want us to, because we're all 3 liberal democracies, we have such commonality, so of course we need to just kumbaya. But we're a constitutional republic. Y'all know this. They love to use that word democracy because it makes it sound super duper awesome and we're all people and we're all in this together. But our country is different. Like, I don't know why the left or the establishment or the elites, I don't know who they are. I really don't care what they are, and I've said that before. But everybody not us loves to forget that we are a constitutional republic. And that in itself, the powers, the rights, the privileges, the immunities that American citizens have from our Constitution are freaking awesome. And other countries try to be like us. And so why all of a sudden are we going to throw away our, system for the sake of some random 20 people who think that they know better for our lives than we know ourselves. So some of the recommendations that they want for common security, they want a common perimeter by 2010. Of course, that was 8 years ago, so that didn't happen that we know of. They want to develop a North American border pass so people can just go from Canada to the United States to Mexico super duper easily. What else they want? They want the law enforcement and military to help them on this course. And don't forget, the elites, they don't treat or think of law enforcement as military, as people, as public servants. They literally only think of our service people as tools, like pawns in their system that just happen to have access to weaponry, legal weaponry, and they can just activate us whenever they want and do whatever they want for their own gain. Well, I digress. I apologize. They want to expand NORAD. That'd be fun. What else? For economic investment, if you will, they want Canada and the United States to give money to Mexico to get them up to snuff, because we all know, unfortunately, they don't have the same system that we do. Like, when are you going to admit that? And that's not a racist thing to say. First of all, they're not a different race. It's the fact that they don't have a stable government there. They don't have rule of law. They don't have a legal system that you can go and, bring your case. People evaporate and just go dark, and you can't find people like all the time. People get kidnapped. And of course, the policia over there is a part of it. So this whole North American community, most of this recommendation is basically the two other countries investing in the third country that is a little behind of the times. They don't have rule of law. They don't have, basic labor practices. They don't have primary and secondary education. So, of course, they just simple. We just give you money and you can just be awesome immediately. I would argue that there has to be a development of a country for all of that to occur. What else do they want? They want a NAD bank. That sounds horrible. North American Development Bank. Yeah, let that sink in. They want open skies and open roads. They want a permanent tribunal. And like this isn't bad enough, they want a North American interparliamentary group. Like, for real, guys. They would rather have, like the EU had or has, a overarching governing body, and I know, that will totally negate our sovereignty. So that is just a fascinating thing. I could have gone into that a lot more, but whenever you hear and you ever see, and the reason why we have to be a lot more vigilant about our citizenship and our sovereignty as a nation, is that at least for the last 14 years, if not earlier, they literally want to erase the United States of America. And in turn, they also want to erase Canada. And yeah, they also want to just change Mexico. But are we going to let them? We are exceptional for a reason, people.
He won't stop until he's the top-rated radio talk show host in America.
What kind of weird competitive freak are you?
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Hey there, party people. This is Liz Mattori filling in for Kevin Jackson on The Kevin Jackson Show, kjradio.com. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter or Facebook. Please send me your suggestions. I love to hear from listeners. I do the Friday show, so let me know throughout the week if there's something that you want me to cover. But for this, I really want to share with you what's going on here in my state of Maryland. Maryland is going by way of California, unfortunately. My county, Montgomery, is the hotbed of progressive, liberal, radical leftist Marxism. And so they, who happen to be the largest delegation in our state house from Montgomery, love to create legislation that will and does destroy any bit of awesomeness that our state once probably held. Whether it's hyper, partisan stuff or environmental restrictions. So there are a couple of other things that I want to warn you about, just in case in your states you hear these things percolate. Again, let's talk about it. You as American citizens, you as, invested, important, you are the most important people in this government, in this country. As American citizens, as legal immigrants, as people who love and want to cherish and protect this country, you have to watch what your legislators are doing. If you can't do it, make sure that you have a friend or a group, Republican clubs, libertarian clubs, whatever you have, your church group, what have you. Identify a couple people who will watch the legislators every session. Ours happens to be like January, February, March, a little bit of April. But they introduce some of the most amazing, sometimes good, many times bad, laws. And if they don't hear from their constituents, that stuff will just go without a blink of an eye. And even when they do speak highly, and talk about, these people don't want this case, and so therefore you rally the troops and get people to call your senators or delegates or whatever you have in your state, and I'm against this, I'm against this. I've testified against the SAFE Act, which is a sanctuary bill to create our state into a sanctuary. But this week, our wonderful legislators passed, I wish I had a drum roll, same-day voting. Let it sink in. Same-day voting without the use of an ID. Who does that benefit? Who do you think? Sure doesn't benefit the Republicans in this state. It only benefits, and it's only there under the guise of, we want to make sure that people of color have access to, voting. All right. And they always say, people of color, black people can't afford, licenses and identifications. We all have IDs. And to think that we can't have IDs and don't have IDs, again, it goes back to liberal paternalism, progressive paternalism. This is another case. They're like, we want people to have access to registering to vote so they can register to vote on the day of election. So you're telling me that these people, any of them who aren't registered, just feel like it. They walk into the polls and they're like, I feel like being civically active right now. No. It's because the Democrat Party and all of the unions have picked all these people up. Hopefully they live in Maryland. Hopefully they live in the region. How do you know that person even lives in your district? But for them not being a part of the voter roster in the first place. That's flag number one. They could come from anywhere and just totally change the makeup and the trajectory of an election. That last day on election day. We have early voting here too, don't forget. The other thing that we have to be watchful of is, yes, people really can't stand me saying this, but it's the truth. Because they moved from motor voter, meaning you can register to vote during the time you get your driver's license, they're actually telling and encouraging illegals and people who are not citizens to sign up to vote at the same time as getting their license. Oh, by the way, that they were allowed to apply for, because of course this is progressive Maryland. And you look at the numbers that have new registrants immediately in the last year only come from one source. They only come from DMV. And again, I'm only telling you this because we're already done for in Maryland. The only benefit, the only, last resort we have is for people like me to run for Congress. So, because this state is just, because we have such a strong, one-party rule here, and that's the other thing, that's the other reason why we need to elect more Republicans, is because we have to have a counterweight. No party, even the Republican Party, should not dominate the entire conversation. There's no way we're going to get to effective solutions if we don't. Yes, we have to stick to our principles. We also need to know what the view is. What are the best practices? What should we do that will serve that purpose in the community, and yeah, at a cost-effective way and the most limited government way. And so, sorry, I digress. But, I know for a fact that, because I was one of those people, they have been moving for these sort of like voting stuff for decades. For at least 30 to 40 years, they have been pushing for more access to voting under the guise, again, of civil rights. But why all of a sudden did they pass, like with a blink of an eye? They were able to pass it so quickly. They didn't pass it for black people, folks. They only passed it so that they can change the course of elections. They want to steal elections. And when you ever say, what is a close election? One you can steal. All these ones that they claim victory, all these special elections, they are very close elections. And if you think about it, the Republicans are the ones that are voting for the people who they want to vote for. Because, let's be honest, especially in my state, we don't have all the bells and whistles that the dominant party has. We don't have all the boatloads of, labor union workers, and all they do is canvass and be activists for the Democrat Party, even though some of the members are actually conservatives, but they don't get a voice, of course. So same-day voting only serves one purpose. Literally, get more Democrats to vote. Oh, I forgot. And they're, of course, registering people by default as Democrat. They don't even say there are two options. And that's why they always use that term, we're a democracy, because people think that, and they're like, oh, well, if we're a democracy, then I must need to be a Democrat. But no, we're a republic. We should be Republicans.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Do you owe back taxes to the IRS or state? The secret to avoiding the IRS nightmare is to seek professional representation. My friends at Security Tax Associates provide the most cost-effective and ethical representation in the industry while helping to avoid seizures, levies, and wage garnishments. Security Tax Associates is here to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken to permanently eliminate any possibility of future tax burdens once and for all. For a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Security Tax Associates, 844-779-4177. That's 844-779-4177. 844-779-4177. Or visit them at securitytaxassociates.com.
Beth Cook Moranville, author of Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope.
Hope, that wonderful, wonderful 4-letter word that you may feel completely out of. I wrote this book to give you great hope. It's not too late. If fetal position is an all too familiar place for you, I understand. If the next 60 seconds are too long, this book is for you. Wherever you are right now, whether you're dealing with divorce or death or sickness, take hope. You are going to make it through this pain. Don't roll your eyes. I've walked this road and I know it. The best is yet to come.
Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope from author and speaker Beth Cook Moranville, can be found on Amazon.com or Kindle.com. For more information, visit closerthanyourBreath.com or on Facebook at Closer Than Your Breath.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Talk about one of the more controversial issues that we face here in Maryland is the legalization of marijuana, pot, cannabis, if you will. We here in Maryland passed medicinal cannabis in 2014. And so actually this year is the first time that they had licenses to grow and licenses to be distributors or dispensaries. And of course, here in Maryland, nothing is right yet until there's absolute corruption. So even in this iteration of partial access to a, in my opinion, a plant that really shouldn't be so regulated. It's more even regulated than fentanyl these days. But you ruin that program. You only allowed for a handful of growers to get licenses in the first place. And oh, by the way, all of them are your cousins and your, campaign contributors. Yeah, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Liz Mattori. Hi, I'm filling in for Kevin Jackson on The Kevin Jackson Show, kjradio.com. You can follow me on Liz Mattori at Liz Mattori, Lizmatory, on Facebook and Twitter. But yeah, so I actually have some friends who have applied and have visited actually some farms out in California, because I need to know more about it because it's such a big, case. I do believe that there's a huge industry that can really benefit from, I guess, like revamping our ag business here in a place like Maryland that has traditionally been an agricultural community. But, there's so much involved in the plants that I do believe that there is some sort of benefit to them. However, and my huge caveat to, legalizing it or not is the effect that it has on people who are already wayward. Meaning that people who are already kind of like out of the system does not incentivize them to get back into the system. And that is what happened in DC, my native town, city, whatever. DC decriminalized it and legalized it to a point where you can, I think, you can have it in your own house, but you can't be out in public. But of course, everybody's, oh my God. That is the other thing I'm really not a big fan of with the full legalization of it, is because some of the strains smell horrendous. Like whenever you smell skunk, it's probably not, it's not a skunk, folks. I know you guys are like pure of heart out there. It's a type of strand that they call skunk. It's very potent. And the term that they will use is it's loud. So it's loud. And loud actually is not as good of a strain as the ones that actually are very docile when it comes to the fragrance. But I'm sorry, I'm getting too much into cannabis. But that is my issue with legalization, that the people who are, teenagers or under 25s or even under 35 that are not employed, for example, it's very hard to stay, keep, and get a job when you didn't have a work ethic in the first place. And again, I know a lot of libertarians out there are all about it. They're about, individual liberty, and whatever I do with my body, I can do whatever I want. And again, I love the wonderful libertarians, but not everybody lives at that high standard that we all aspire for. And what happens if people don't even know that that's an option? The whole concept of personal responsibility, and you can take care of your business. And if you, smoke a doobie at night, you're going to set your alarm clock and wake up in the morning for the job that you allegedly have and keep it. All these variables out there is like, those are the problems that I have. And also, I cannot stand, oh my God, this is like my big rant about legalization of pot. But I was over in California a few years back visiting a couple of my friends, and I oh my God, I rented a Prius. Oh my gosh. I kind of liked driving the Prius, I admit. You drive that thing all the way around and like you hardly have to fill it. I mean, it's freaking awesome. So I was like driving and I was going, I think I was in, where was I? Somewhere up in the mountains. And I was visiting, and I got out of the car and I was just walking around looking at all the cool, like, terracotta and so beautiful, like, Mexicali and all that. And then I was like, what the heck is that smell, right next to the playground. And that's my problem. Like, if you are going to do the deed, can you be a little bit more like respectful for like everybody else, including children? I mean, that is the problem I have. It's like, it's still, you can get what they call like the secondhand high, or a contact high, I can't stand the fact that I know this terminology, but it is what it is. And again, like, if we have the medical cannabis program that they totally just destroyed, if anyone, they need to increase the grower licenses. Oh, there's the thing that happened with us. You don't know about this, but they had they allowed for 12 licenses, but only 3 people got up and running by this year. And so there's like tons of dispensaries now across the state, but there are only a handful of growers that can create enough product for said dispensary. So you have all these people who actually have like chronic illnesses and actually have been prescribed this, medicine to take care of their pain management or what have you. And a lot of the children who have epilepsy use the oils. Oils now are like $7,000 an ounce. That's not affordable. That is not available for the consumer community, for the patient community. I think an ounce was like to get your, what is it called? The prescription for whatever strain that they recommend was like $2,400. I mean, who has $2,400? I don't think this stuff is covered under insurance, folks. Like all these different things that we, if you're going to like push for the several different, legalization. Again, like the other thing, honestly, is like they really don't. I'm concerned that the people who are pushing for legalization of marijuana only want the votes. They don't care that a bunch of kids who like are in Baltimore, for example, are like, yeah, man, like we want to get like legal. Yeah, whatever. First of all, they're smoking anyway. Even if it's illegal, they're still smoking it. But, they're like, yeah, they pass it. And then they get the vote for it. And then that's it. The only reason why they want to legalize it. That's the reason why places like Maryland, wonderful Maryland Democrats and progressives, there are libertarians who are for it too. I'm not going to short you libertarians out there. But I just wish that there was a lot more personal responsibility in place before we went there. And again, maybe if more of us knew and appreciated conservative values and, knew why we are how we are, people would be able to make better decisions for themselves. That's ultimately what it is. I don't like the fact that the government is, basically force-feeding us certain ways of living. And, when you're living, in 3 generations of poverty and all is relatively not as fruitful of living, then all you need is to get high and just turn it off and forget about it and then not be productive again. How is that a solution? But yes, guess what? Progressives really don't care about the benefit of the community. If you push them, they just want their weed.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Okay, so I told you that I live in Maryland. And Maryland is literally like the East Coast version of California, or at very least it's turning into that. I'm going to break down several key factors that I think the rest of the country needs to be mindful of, because this is what our Democrat-controlled state has been doing to our wonderful state. Though we have a Republican governor, and hopefully pray to God that we have a second term with Governor Hogan, these next hour, you're going to hear all the different issues that we are dealing with here in Maryland. I'm Liz Matori. I'm filling in for Kevin Jackson on his show on kjradio.com. But yeah, so the number one I'd like to talk about is gerrymandering. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court of the United States decided to hear the case that actually one of my friends is a part of, about the gerrymandered, specifically the gerrymandered Congressional District 6. There are, for your information, there are 8 different congressional districts that make up Maryland based on our population. And of course, everybody has 2 senators on the federal level. But back in 2010, based on that census, every 10 years, that next year, in our state, the governor gets to draw up the lines. Like literally, we have a very powerful governor here. So Martin O'Malley, our governor at that time, and the Democrat Party, the Maryland Democrat Party, my former employer, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for talking about it, but whatever, it's over. They were like, you know what? Their goal has always been to just get rid of all Republicans. They want all Democrat federal delegation that Maryland sends to Congress. As you know, maybe you know this, but I definitely will relay to you, is that Maryland is the northernmost southern state, southernmost northern state. Our history is so profound that, you know, people talk about the Union. We would have seceded from the Union if Lincoln did not shut down Annapolis and the State House. People wanted to secede. So, if anything, that history of Maryland is very much prevalent. And so we have the 8 different districts, and CD6, which is Congressional District 6, was changed specifically to get rid of the Republican congressman. His name is Roscoe Bartlett, who used to be representing District 6. So by 2012, they changed the lines to bring the district all the way down from the northern, you know, there's Garrett, Allegheny, Washington counties, Frederick County, and Carroll County, which is what they consider Western Maryland and Central Maryland. And they brought that congressional district, chopped that in half, and brought some of it down to where I live, Montgomery County, and then brought District 8, which mostly was where I live, pulled that all the way up to the Pennsylvania border. So there's like, you know, Siamese twin districts between the western and central part of Maryland. The only purpose was to get rid of the Republican. And funnily enough, Governor O'Malley admitted that that's what he did. So there is a Supreme Court case now that is questioning the validity, and actually they brought it on the grounds of the First Amendment, that their First Amendment rights in District 6 have been nullified, freedom of speech, expression, what have you, because of this partisan gerrymandering. And you know, everybody says that Republicans do it too. But whenever anybody tells you that, tell them, say, Liz Matory said that when Democrats do it, the lines are a lot more severe because they have to dig into highly populated areas like the Washington, D.C. area and Baltimore City and pull Democrat votes to negate rural and conservative votes. And so when I ran in 2016, I left the Democratic Party specifically because of the gerrymandering. When I traveled the district to research District 8 at that time, I'm running now in District 2, but in District 8, you realize how disenfranchised people got. Because as I mentioned, in District 8, for example, you have to drive from where I live in near DC all the way up to the Pennsylvania border. You're like, wow, people here totally have a different way of life there and vice versa. And on top of that, we have closed primaries here in Maryland, so the people who end up surviving these closed primaries tend to be the most left or the most right candidates, as was the case in District 8 in 2016. But the case that they're talking about this week, and the Supreme Court specifically focused on D6. And Justice Kagan actually said, she's like, wow, like, if you literally look at the numbers, you purposely took out 360,000 voters and incorporated 350,000 voters. Each one flipped Republican to Democrat. I think it was a 60-40 split, and they just swapped it. And she was like, how much more evidence of partisan intent do you need? And then you're like, yeah, what are we doing? Especially when it comes to our representative government. How do we trust our government? Especially, I mean, again, like, that's how I felt about the Democrat Party here in Maryland, is like, I can't trust you anymore. If you're willing, first of all, if you're claiming that you represent the people, you swear by it. This is what you do. You care about the black people and the brown people and the Latino people and the Asian people and the, LGBTQ people and the questioning people and the transgender people and all that stuff. Well, yeah, you're all for the people. Except for when it counts. Where they get to choose who their representatives are. You want yourselves to choose who gets to represent us. We could talk about all the other lines because each one of our congressional districts is gross. Like the district that I'm running into is actually the oldest gerrymandered district. Because prior to 2010, 2011, 2001 was the one that they gerrymandered District 2 out. It initially was represented by Governor Ehrlich, who before was congressman for District 2. Mostly covered Baltimore County. But the Democrat Party in 2001, after the 2000 census, they're like, oh, great, we can change lines again. And so they basically carved out, I think it was 3 and 2. And it looked like, literally, it's like a blood splatter. And sadly, it goes around Baltimore County, but they brought District 2, and now it kind of like whittles around Baltimore City through the county, from the west side to the north side to the east side, on the way through, all the way up to Aberdeen, through Hartford, and then down again through Dundalk, Middle River, all that, and parts of Anne Arundel and Howard County. So again, when you're like seeing and you're wondering why your representatives don't represent you anymore, look at your own state's lines, not just for the federal positions, but also for your state level positions and your county level positions. I just went to a Republican Women's Club meeting today, and they were saying that, their county council really purposefully divided their district so that, Republicans would never win in this district. I mean, we've gotten to that point. People always ask, why are we so hyper-partisan? Why don't we get along? Not all of it, but most of it is because of the gerrymandering. Because our politicians have to be more extreme than not because they can be cantered, remember? Eric Cantor was one of the representatives in Virginia, and he was ousted by someone who is more right than he was, because many people complained that he wasn't, there all the time. But when you create these districts that are so they're like neon one way or the other, you literally have no reason to care about the moderate view. I personally think it's important, but these districts basically make their representatives be hyper-partisan in order to keep their positions. We could talk about term limits. We talked about term limits last week. The reason why we have 2 years is because it wasn't supposed to be a career thing. But the other element to this is that in order to stay in office, these representatives all fundraise. And that's the only thing they have to do, is because that's what they have. They have to fundraise to keep in their positions. And when you look at that, you're like, wow, they don't really care about us anymore. They are really only wanting to stay in office. And how do they stay in office? But they fundraise. And so they now are, again, beholden to the people who are giving them big dollar donations and contributions, which most of them are PACs. And again, who are they representing? I know we've talked about gerrymandering, but it goes from gerrymandering to partisanism to money in government. All of it's related. And I kid you not, American citizens are the only ones that are going to stop it, if we can. I sure would like to try.
Kevin Jackson on the Black Sphere Radio Network.
Do you owe back taxes to the IRS or state? The secret to avoiding the IRS nightmare is to seek professional representation. My friends at Security Tax Associates provide the most cost-effective and ethical representation in the industry while helping to avoid seizures, levies, and wage garnishments. Security Tax Associates is here to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken to permanently eliminate any possibility of future tax burdens once and for all. For a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Security Tax Associates, 844-779-4177. That's 844-779-4177. 844-779-4177, or visit them at securitytaxassociates.com.
putting an end to identity politics. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
So I've been telling you that Maryland is a good old sanctuary. Just like California, just like some parts of New York, definitely parts of Florida. We actually, I remember hearing this from one of the activists back in the day when we were Democrats, when I was a Democrat at least. This might be like an urban legend, but there's apparently this list that's in El Salvador that people know about. And Montgomery County is at the top of the list of friendly jurisdictions for people to go when they want to like go to the country and like have at it. So they've been having at it for at least 20 years now. And we in Maryland are, dealing with the ramifications of it. I'm Liz Mattori. I'm filling in for Kevin Jackson on his show on KJRadio.com, The Kevin Jackson Show. Please follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Liz Mattori, LizMatory. Man, I tell you what, sanctuaries are beast. Politicians are so funny. They're like, we testified at the city of Rockville, which totally now is a full-on sanctuary city. And the legislators over there, the city councilmen were like, well, nothing in this legislation says that we're a sanctuary. And we're like, it's not going to be written out that these people are in a sanctuary jurisdiction. It is based on what they call, de facto. Like, it's not by law, but it's by fact that your jurisdiction is functioning as a sanctuary. What does that mean? It means, particularly when it comes to criminal justice or crimes and acted upon, the innocent. And this is how it plays out here in particularly our area, is that if someone is here that does not have permission to live here, and oh, by the way, if you don't have permission to work, people always say, oh, there's so much money that, unlawful entrants or undocumenteds contribute to the economy. If you don't have a work permit to work here, then you're not allowed to contribute to the economy. That's one huge factor that people always put their hat on, and you're like, you don't have permission to work. You are literally doubly messing up our system. So anyway, a lot of the people, unfortunately, in 2014, came here as what they call unaccompanied minors. There were like droves of unaccompanied minors that our Governor O'Malley back in the day was like, oh, come here, we welcome you with the compassion, with open arms. We want you to come here. And with that influx of unaccompanied minors, they grew the roster of MS-13 and the 18th Street Gang. They were already here. They were growing. They have been growing here, especially in the Northern Virginia, Montgomery County area for at least 15 years. Oddly enough, some of the wardens will say, we had a decline in native gangs like the Crips and the Bloods and all that. They actually had a truce. But from that truce, the gang activity that increased was from the Salvadorian community. And so people say, oh, oh gosh, this NAACP guy in Baltimore was so on me last month when I testified at Annapolis against Sanctuary. And he's like, oh, what the conservatives did to El Salvador? I was like, look, whatever happened in the 80s, happened in the 80s. But if you want to make a case, then why don't we just invest back into El Salvador? We can help fix it. We fix and create countries all the time. Why not do that if we really wanted to care about El Salvadorians? But we don't. We want to take advantage of cheap labor. And that's the other thing that I get so angry about is that, people who come here as sanctuary and also do not learn the language and don't learn our principles and appreciate our, our laws and our, way of life, is that is what keeps them in the shadows. It is not the fact that they think that, police are going to get them and deport them. Though if they've committed crimes, yes, they are ramping it up a notch. And I know a lot of people who are doing that for Homeland. But It is the fact that you're not learning the language, you're not understanding why this country is how it functions. You hide yourself. So you go back to it, like there are programs out there that try to help our law enforcement deal with the increase in gang activity. You know, when you have people who are like literally carving hearts out of other teenagers, and as if it's a rite of passage, and raping girls, and a huge human trafficking issue here through the Port of Baltimore. It's horrible. Like, people have to really, really watch it. So we have this program, Frederick County, the sheriff in Frederick County, shout out to the Frederick County sheriff. He's awesome. For the last 10 years, they've used the program. It's called the 287G program. It is a memorandum of understanding between ICE and the jail, the county jail for this purpose, to make sure that they can coordinate when an illegal person who has committed a crime come through their doors. And we got to visit the jail last month, actually, to see the program and to see like what it was all about, because of course the progressives think it's like, oh, it's bigoted, it's racist, like we can't have the 287G, like, you know, states' rights. All of a sudden they discover states' rights when it comes to sanctuary, right? Even our freaking attorney general is just like pushing for that. Oh, it's a states' rights, we can do whatever we want. Dude, as lawyers, you should know federal law trumps state and local law. The federal government, Congress specifically, not the president, gets to identify the laws governing immigration. And they, you know, place agencies to be responsible for the, you know, the watching over of our communities to make sure that people who not only want to do harm to us, but have done harm, not only to us, but to their own brethren, you know, get deported. Again, legal immigrants. Everybody knows when you come here, you don't have to commit a crime in order to be deported. You can just mess up. It's not like you can jaywalk and get deported. But there does not have to be that precedent. There does not have to be a criminal reason for you to get deported. You are here with permission or not. And anything, whether it's a work permit or green card or what have you, if our government somewhere determines that you are a risk or that you broke a particular law, you get deported. That's just how our system works. So in a place like, again, why we consider them sanctuaries is that the local and state and counties have protected these people, and they allow for them to stay in our country even when they break the laws. And so what this 287G program allows is like, okay, once everybody answers the same questions, like where do you live? Are you married? Do you have children or what have you? And one of the questions is, what is your status? That's it, folks. That is the tool that some jurisdictions are able to use. But the problem that jurisdictions face is that when they don't have these programs in place where, you know, 287G, they have an agreement with ICE and then they'll flag it and they'll hold, they have a different holding cell. ICE comes down, picks up the person, and they can be deported based on just, you know, raping a woman, you know, the usual. But in a place like Montgomery, this is what they do. They actually release the person before ICE gets there. They have a detainer, what they say is detainer. You have to keep that person in that facility before ICE can go and get them or grab them. But sanctuaries will allow the folks out. And again, people get to what they call, they recidivate. They continue the criminal activity. And you can't even talk about it because you're considered a racist or you're, you know, a bigot. And as I said, the sad thing about all this is that the people who don't get this benefit of, like, you know, literally catch and release are American-born people. Black, white, shoot, brown, whatever frickin' color. The people, Americans who get caught up in the criminal justice system don't get, you know, a pass. So therein lies the issue where people who don't even have permission to be here, and many of them come here for the sole purpose to take advantage of our amazing system. Because, oh, by the way, don't forget, the places where they're coming from don't have rule of law. So just like anything, when you have this like very savvy way of maneuvering with no restraints, you literally run circles around this country. When they're saying, oh, you need a license for that, you're like, I don't need a license for that, bye. You know, you just continue on your merry way. But here we are being like, oh my gosh, we need to have a filing fee and filing deadline for this, that, and the other. But no, when you're coming from a lawless society, you come to a law country, you're like, whatever.
He won't stop until he's the top-rated radio talk show host in America.
What kind of weird competitive freak are you?
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.